Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. We've recently covered that the mission age was lowered from 19 to 18 for women that want to serve a mission, which is a big deal. And I think it has to do with the second coming, but we have some new information that's come out as to President Oaks and his thoughts about how this is going to benefit young women. And so the question is, does this have to do with the second coming, or is it more about the benefit that young women get by being able to go on missions earlier? So if you go to this Salt Lake Tribune article, it starts out lowering the minimum mission age for young women from 19 to 18 was meant partly, and I agree with them there. That's why I have partly highlighted in red, was meant partly, quote, to reduce the age of marriage, end quote, for couples in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So said recently installed church president Dallin H. Oaks in an interview he and his wife Kristen had Saturday with the church-owned Deseret News and Faith's own communications department. The interview occurred in Burley, Idaho, where he dedicated a new temple. So I want to explore this and I think clarify, because I think some people, when they read this part of the interview, they think, oh, this is the reason. And I don't think that it is the only reason. I think that the Salt Lake Tribune got this right where it said partly. The reason why is because if we go to my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming, we've noted that there's all these things taking place in the church. I mean, it probably goes before President Nelson, but when President Nelson became president of the church, there were a lot of big changes. And it feels like it has to do with preparation for the second coming, making the church more global, streamlined, hastening the work with things like this. So this is what I have on this spreadsheet in terms of changes to missionary work. Let me just make sure I have everything. So May 6th of 2021, based on area presidency direction and approval, eligible members of the church anywhere in the world may now be considered for a senior service mission according to a letter from the first presidency. So that means more missionaries. November 1st, 2023, announcement of the creation of 36 new missions, which back then I was like, wow, that is a lot. I don't know if before that point there had been a larger number of missions announced because I've only been doing this channel for 4.5 years. But back then that really surprised me. But it equates to more missions, and it's probably to accommodate more missionaries, I think. And then, exactly a year later, I didn't think about that till just now. November 1st, 2024, single men 40 and over can now serve as senior missionaries. So obviously that means more missionaries. And then we have the upcoming 55 new missions that are going to be created this year. When that happened, I was like, okay, yeah, 36 missions just a little while ago, and now 55. Seems like things are moving ahead and hastening. And then this one from November 21st, 2025, what we're talking about in this video, the lowering of the mission age for women from 19 to 18. So I don't think that it's just for the benefit of young women as far as let's go to the interview and read the whole thing. The Salt Lake Tribune only had an excerpt from this interview. So this is on I'm on Newsroom, and the interviewer asks, you recently announced that young women can serve missions at age 18 instead of 19. How do you think that will bless the lives of young women across the church? So that's important to note. He's answering, how is this going to bless the lives? The question is not being asked, why did this happen? Although, like Salt Lake Tribune noted, this is probably partly the reason. Okay, President Oaks, I think it will increase their time for planning their lives, whether they use their possibility to serve a mission or whether they plan their lives in other directions. It simply increases the options. I also hope that it will reduce the age of marriage. Yeah, and that's kind of a big deal. And he actually talked about this, um, about his concerns about marriage and birth rates in the last general conference. We're going to review that in just a minute. I also hope that it will reduce the age of marriage. In the time that we have lowered the mission age for young men and for young women in the past, we've seen an increase in people who meet someone in the mission field and marry them, which is perfectly appropriate if it doesn't start too early in their missionary service. That's really interesting because when I was on a mission, I felt like it was pretty clear that you need to avoid that, or you need to, um, well, be focused on the mission. And I think that's still true. But at the same time, I myself am um, one who benefits from someone that got married to somebody on their mission. My dad went on his mission to Portugal and he baptized my mom, and he served the rest of his mission, and then afterwards they got married and she came to the United States and became a US citizen. And so here I am. And I can think of probably a thousand other examples. I know somebody in my extended family who it's so interesting how this worked out. He got called to serve in Colorado to this one particular mission. I don't remember the name of the mission. And it turned out that a girl about the same age as him, or I guess a little bit older, went to that exact same mission at the exact same time. Well, guess what? When they both came home, they got married to each other. They're from the same ward, went to the same mission at the same time, came home, and they got married. So whether it's marrying, uh, I guess, an investigator, whether it's marrying a member of the church in that area, or whether it's marrying another missionary, it does happen, and it's a blessing, obviously, to those people. So yeah, it's just interesting. It's interesting to see him say, um, let's see. He says, which is perfectly appropriate if it doesn't start too early in their missionary service. Yeah, because if it does, then it could distract you from your mission, and maybe even, uh, I wonder how many people have ended their missions because of that. Okay, so continuing, I think it's part of the Lord's plan to overcome the tendency of waiting until the late 20s to have a first marriage. I think we will see a reduction in the age of marriages for Latter day Saints. All right, that is really interesting. So let's go to the October 2025 General Conference. This was President Oaks' uh, main talk. He did like a introduction at the beginning, but this was his talk of that General Conference. The family-centered gospel of Jesus Christ. And under section 3, he says some interesting things. So yeah, this could be evidence that this whole thing about lowering the mission age, but also getting people to get married earlier, it may have been part of the reason based on his concerns that he expresses here. Despite the doctrinal context, there's opposition. In the United States, we are suffering from a deterioration in marriage and childbearing. For nearly 100 years, the proportion of households headed by married couples has declined, and so has the birth rate. The marriages and birth rates of our church members are much more positive, but they have also declined significantly. It is vital that Latter day Saints do not lose their understanding of the purpose of marriage and the value of children. That is the future for which we strive. Exaltation is a family affair, President Nelson has taught us. Only through the saving ordinances of the gospel of Jesus Christ can families be exalted. The national declines in marriage and childbearing are understandable for historic reasons, but Latter-day Saint values and practices should improve, not follow those trends. And then this next part, I think this is tied to why he believes the marriage age and birth rates have been coming down. I don't think it's any mistake that he talks about this next. In my boyhood 80 years ago, I lived on my grandparents' farm in a setting where almost all that happened during the day was under the direction of the family. There was no television or other electronics to distract from family activities. In contrast, in today's urban society, few members experience consistent family-centered activities. Okay, so he's starting to get into it, the difference between a rural lifestyle and urban. Rural and urban. Urban living and modern transportation, organized entertainment, and high-speed communication have made it easy for youth to treat their homes as boarding houses where they sleep and take an occasional meal, but where there's far less parental direction of their activities. I just have that highlighted because this particular part of his talk really stuck out to me as a parent myself. I'm constantly concerned about my kids, not the direction that they're going, but that Jenica and I are doing a good job raising them. And in this area, I think that we could do better. Homes as boarding houses, where your kids are just basically there doing their own thing, eating, sleeping, entertaining themselves. Yeah. Okay. And I think that that's probably something that most families could work on. But then this last paragraph here, I think that this is a reason that he believes that birth rates are going down. Parental influences have also been diluted by the way in which most current members of the church earn a living. Okay. Should have highlighted this. Earning a living. In times past, one of the great influences that unified families was the experience of struggling together in pursuit of a common goal, such as taming the wilderness or earning a living. The family was an organized and conducted unit of economic production. That's important. Unit of economic production. Today, most families are units of economic consumption, which do not require a high degree of family organization and cooperation. So, I feel like the first time that I encountered this for myself, this concept, was when I started doing family history. And I looked at my family tree and realized that as you go back in time, those generations before me had more and more children. They're much larger families, and it seemed like the vast majority of them were farmers. And it makes sense back in those days where your family is basically a small business. And this is not meant to sound cold, and this is not why we have children, but your children essentially become employees in that business, but it's based on love. It's based on survival. It's based, just like he said here, that they're struggling together in pursuit of a common goal. And it could be farming, or it could be a small business or something, but I think it made it possible to have more children because each child became something that a part of the family that would help produce and help support the family, to help the family survive. Whereas now, it's usually both the mother and the father, both of them, that go to work full time, and then pay for all these expenses. Usually, obviously there's things that you pay that you need to survive, but then beyond that, there's just all these bells and whistles, entertainment, electronics, going on vacations, going on cruises. Um, this child has to have all this child has to have all this. And I think that we've accepted too high of a standard of living to where back in those days, in generations past, uh, they would view us probably as spoiled, that we have all these luxuries that we now consider necessities. And I have a quote from President Monson. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but he talked about the fact that nowadays there are too many young couples that put off having a family because they look at their parents and think that they have to have everything that their parents worked for over decades, that they have to start out with that those are all necessities. When the fact is that their parents spent a lifetime accumulating wealth and property and possessions. Um, I feel like we've become too used to cozy living. And therefore, we think that we have to have all these things and earn all this money before we can have a family. And by that point, you can't even afford a family. Now, like I've said before, I think it's really good to work hard to earn a lot of money. And I applaud all the people out there that are wealthy. And because they're wealthy, they have a lot of children. That's good. I think that's really good. But wealth and work should not come in the way of having children in the first place. And I think that's what happens to too many people. And so they're paying for all this consumption and thinking that, well, we can't have children if they can't have, a pool and ATVs, and they need to have this and they need to have that. It's basically sacrificing potential children for material possessions. And don't even get me started on the cost of housing. I've talked about it a million times, especially nowadays in places like Utah. Utah's like one of the worst offenders, from what I can tell, with home prices. It's what's driven me away from Utah into Independence, Missouri, because things are at least kind of sane over here. I was just talking to somebody yesterday. You'll never believe this. And this has happened a number of times. Here, let's switch the screen and look at something different. You won't believe the number of times, or I can't believe the number of times that since I've moved here, I've gone to church sites and I've ran into somebody that I've known. Okay, so for example, I think it was in 2024, there was this outbreak of tornadoes in the United States. And the first one was in the Salt Lake Valley. It ended up damaging the house of one of my viewers, subscribers. I assume that she subscribed. Her name is Lori Hast. And I promoted her GoFundMe. And so that was back in 2024. In 2025, we moved to Independence. And now, living in Independence, it's much easier to get up to winter quarters, which is like, I think 3.5 hours away or something like that. And I started my new channel, Explore Church Sites. And I went up there and wanted to record, the cemetery and the temple and the visitor center. And as I was making my way over to the temple on that particular day, I just happened to run across Lori Hast as she was going to the temple. She was in the parking lot making her way to the entrance. And out of all people, and out of all days and out of all times, I met her right then and there as I was recording a video for Explore Church Sites. Well, yesterday I went to Adamonte. It was Sunday, and my wife and I like to go on drives, especially on Sundays, and just talk about life. And especially now that we have this new house, we're just like in this moment of catharsis. And we went to Adamonte, and there was a car there, and a guy gets out And he comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, Christian Homestead." I'm like, "Oh, hey, hi." And it turns out that it's the brother of the guy that donated my microphone that I'm speaking on right now. So the person that donated my microphone, his name is Joe Signs, and this was his brother, Barry Signs. Of all people. And I'm telling you, this has happened a couple other times. But he is from Idaho or from Iowa. Iowa is the Idaho of Missouri, by the way. And we were talking about this, just how ridiculous it is out west trying to buy a house. Everything's so expensive. And he was talking about how he's like learning to, it's kind of complicated, but there's this guy that helps people learn how to build their own houses. And um, we were just talking about this concept, how it's so much easier to live here in the Midwest. So I don't know. Uh, anyway, we kind of went on a big tangent there, but the lowering of the mission age for women and President Oak's concern about uh, marriage age and birth rates, which of course is going to be the same concern of the Lord because it's his church and he speaks to his prophet. Yeah, this may be one of the reasons why the mission age was lowered. But like I've said a million times before, I think the Lord typically hits many birds with one stone. And I think ultimately it does have to do with the hastening, because when we look at all these other changes to mission ages and changes with the way that missionary work is done, which has provided more missions, more missionaries, I think it fits into that larger picture. Um, and then one other thing, let's see, let's go back to, or let's go to this article. This is, I think this is actually, yeah, this is a different article, but it's also Deseret News. These are highlights from a previous video. President Oak spoke of a generation of young people who are sharing the message of the Church of Jesus Christ in record numbers. There are now 83,000 full-time missionaries. So I don't know why I messed up on this, but this spreadsheet is called timeline missionary work. Let's zoom in. There was another article where Elder Cook was talking, and I think I misunderstood. I thought he was talking about the total number of missionaries, which would be the full-time teaching missionaries, service missionaries, and senior missionaries. Well, this one makes it clear that it's full-time teaching missionaries. So I'm keeping track of these numbers. And so 83,000. The last number that I have goes back to 2024, where it was 74,127. And we know that right now the church is in the middle of this missionary surge. But it's interesting because this is basically a year apart, maybe a little bit over a year and apart. It's increased 10,000 from 74 or 9,000 from 74 to 83. That's a pretty big jump. When you look at these previous years, I don't think you really see that, except for like right here when it went in 2012, it went from 58,000 to 83,000. That's when the mission age was lowered by President Monson, and that was a really big deal. And there was a spike, and then after that it kind of tapered off, and then we had the pandemic which reduced the number of missionaries during those years. But now it's starting to climb back up, and it would seem that this is the next largest surge in the number of missionaries. So the work is hastening. The lowering of the mission age for women, I think, is going to make this number go up, as well as, you know, the other stuff that we were talking, the single men 40 and over, for to be senior missionaries. And then this thing here, based on area presidency direction and approval, eligible members of the church anywhere in the world may now be considered for a senior service mission. I don't know if that's like, I can't remember the details of that story. I don't know if it was like only certain areas. Maybe you could only do it in certain countries. I don't know. But yeah, it seems like this has to do with the hastening, the second coming, and then you also have additional benefits, including hopefully more marriages at younger ages. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.